And welcome back, footy fans. It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another SANFL Snapshot review. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting further and further into the SANFL men's season. Unfortunately, the women's are over, so we only have the men to talk about. A little sad, but you know what? There's still a lot of great
Mhm.
footy action. And joining me today is Mr. Phil Aspinall. Phil, thank you for joining me, sir.
Yeah, g'day, Donnie. G'day, viewers. Yeah, good to be with you this evening. And the backdrop here was the view we have when we're commentating at Adelaide Oval. So just a still shot there, but one of the best venues in the land.
I definitely agree. Absolutely gorgeous picture there. And really quickly, our second panelist member, Darce has a few things to do with, especially considering it's his wife's birthday here recently. So we told him, you take the night off, take care of the wonderful lady that you have there, and we will see you again very, very soon. So huge shout out to him and to his lovely other half for a wonderful birthday over here. So let's jump into it, Phil. Again, we have the end of round 10 all the way up through round 13 to cover in the men's. Again, it's coming thick and fast. I really quickly, your thoughts on the footy that we have seen so far.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I think we've seen some trends emerge, and the reigning premiers have really continued to struggle. Obviously, Norwood got on a little bit of a run and won a couple of games in succession, but they're still struggling at the bottom of the table. And I think they're gonna miss finals, which doesn't happen all too often to have a premier, the following year miss finals and even win the wooden spoon, the last position. There's been some form runs of some selective sides. The Double Blues, Sturt, were really good for a while, up and down a little bit of late. Centrals are ticking along okay, dropped a few games they perhaps shouldn't have lost. But Port Adelaide, the Magpies or the Power Reserves, have had some good players playing at local level and have been beneficiary of some quality wins and have moved their way up inside the five.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So let's jump in to the action again. Like we said, we had to go back. So we had the split round for round 10. So we have two games left. And because we have a little less to talk about, I think we'll go a little bit more in depth into some of these games a little bit. So let's jump to it. So the last game that we did not cover from round 10 would be the Glenelg v West Adelaide game, which saw the Glenelg Tigers get a nice little win, 86-49. And just looking at the trend at this one, it was one of those where okay start, but then that second quarter, Glenelg just absolutely went on a tear, getting 6 goals, three in that second quarter, and just kind of never looked back.
Yeah, this was the Channel 7 game, so I watched this one on the telly and we saw the class of Glenelg in that second term and the Tigers' firepower, probably the best forward line in the competition. Lockie Hosey, Luke Reynolds, Liam McBean, out of the 12 goals, they kicked 8 of them between the three of them. I think they're the top four of the top three in the SANFL Ken Farmer medal, which is the medal for the leading goal kicker. And Glenelg have, three of the four in there. So they were too good on the day, and the Bloods were competitive, but the Tigers just rose to the top with their class.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I think that's the reason why Glenelg is being discussed as being a premiership favorite this year. Just they're just so good at times. And then the other game in round 10 saw the Adelaide Reserves knock off the South Panthers 78-41. And then the Crows just too good for just too long. A great first quarter, kicking 7 goals in the first quarter and just never really looking back.
Yeah, and this was in pretty poor conditions down at Noarlunga, the southern suburbs of Adelaide, and renowned for strong winds and heavy rain. And Noarlunga, the oval itself, has taken a bit of a battering this year, and so the conditions of the ground haven't been great. It's quite boggy and heavy underfoot. And that first quarter, that's where the game was won and lost. South have been one of the least performing teams in the competition for mine, and I think Jared Wright, their coach, is under a little bit of pressure. They've probably touted as playing finals. They just haven't been able to get any consistency. They've had some injuries, like all clubs have, but this game was just the class of the Crows in that, particularly in that first term, and ran away very convincing winners.
Definitely, for sure. So let's move over to round 11 and a cracking game to start off the round as Port Adelaide get the win by 10 over Westies, 92-82, and a game that looked really competitive for most of the time. Just the Port Adelaide in the fourth quarter were able to get able to get the goal to get the win here in this one.
Yeah, look, and again, the class of some of those AFL players, I think for this game, Port Adelaide had 19 of their 22 were AFL listed. And you look at some of the inclusions, the likes of Xavier Dersma coming back from injury. He's a quality player at AFL level for Port Adelaide, kicked a couple of important goals. Francis Evans rewarded this week with selection at AFL level against Collingwood, but he's been super consistent for Port in the SANFL and deserving of his elevation. But he was a really good player. And Westies were competitive. I think, what was it, 2 goals, the difference in the end, and up until 3/4 time, it was only 2 points. So the Bloods certainly have some competitive players on their list, but just struggled to get that 4 quarters together.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And it's good. And again, it pushes it, but it just shows you the class of the AFL player
Yeah.
being down in the SANFL. So definitely for sure. Jump over to it as Woodville West Torrens fall to South Adelaide 76-58 in a cracking game. One of those where it looks like, just looking at the scoreline here, is that really competitive through most of the game. Got away a little bit from Woodville West Torrens in the third quarter. Tried to drag it back, just didn't have enough in the fourth quarter to be able to pull it back within striking distance.
Yeah, this was a really important win for South Adelaide because their season was at a real crossroads, and unfortunately, they haven't won too many after this one, and continue to be down the bottom end of the ladder. But Jade Sheedy and the Eagles, we know they've been a successful side in recent seasons, having won a couple of premierships a few seasons back. He's had a big turnover of players on his list, and I think in this game he had a lot of players unavailable due to injury. South Adelaide played some really good footy. Young Schillerbeer did well up forward, kicking 3 goals, but for mine, yeah, South Adelaide just really good on the day. The Eagles don't lose too many at home, but the Panthers have a bit of a wood on them at Mornteen Kia Oval. So that was a really good win for South Adelaide. Unfortunately, they just weren't able to back it up.
Definitely for sure. And then this one's got to be tough here, Phil. Geelong, I mean, the Glenelg absolutely smashed the Duggies 120-57. I mean, this has got to be tough as a Dougie supporter, because again, Glenelg just too good.
Yeah, the Tigers led at every change. I called this game on the SANFL Now stream, and they were just impressive. The Glenelg side at the time were probably the best team in the competition. They've had a few hiccups in recent weeks, but yeah, they were just all class. You know, they led at every change, 5 goals to 3 in the first term. And I talk about that forward potency. Lockie Hosey, Luke Reynolds kicked 4 goals amongst them. Lockie Hosey, people would have saw the social media highlights, took an absolute hanger of a contested mark on the grandstand side, right in front of our commentary team, called beautifully by young Lockie Gould in the commentary box. So yeah, tough day at the office for the Bulldogs, and they were just outclassed by a far fancier opponent.
Definitely for sure. And then a little bit of a shocker, but as you had kind of said in the last podcast, is Norwood was getting a few guys back from injury. So they
Yep.
get the 29-point win here, 59-30. But I mean, just looking at it, I think Sturt's kicking themselves, because 12 behinds in this game, I think, really hurt them.
Yeah, that second quarter was probably telling, where they only kicked 5 behinds and a few of them were set shots on goal. I remember watching the highlights of this one on the SANFL Now stream, and it was one of those games where Norwood showed some real grit and class. This was played at Wigan Oval. These two sides are in the eastern suburbs of Adelaide, a bit more of the, I suppose, the heightened suburbs, and they were quite competitive. They're good arch rivals, and great win for Norwood. Jade Rawlings, their coach, really praised his side after the game, and it was a character building win. Unfortunately, they're coming from such a long way back, Donnie. We know that they're the reigning premiers, but they lost their first 9 games, and they're going to struggle to play finals footy, as I mentioned before. But this was a big win for them.
Yeah, but the thing though is that they may not make finals, but you never know. Sometimes they can actually influence how the finals go, because like I
Yeah,
said, they're playing much better footy than they did at the start of the year. As I said, they got a little bit healthier, but
yeah,
as kind of Port Adelaide ran into it last year in the AFL. So sometimes if you get in too big a hole, it's just so hard to get out. But you can play spoiler, which sometimes can be just as fun if you can't make finals. So, and then
agreed.
got to be game of the round as the Roosters beat the Adelaide Crows reserves by 9, 66-57. And I mean, an electric start by the Roosters, kicking up by 5 goals after at quarter time, 6-3. And then slowly the Crows kind of crawl back into it, but just a little too much of the Roosters there at the end, with a cracking 9-point win.
Yeah, really important win for them, because North have been a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. They've been very up and down this year. And for mine, along with Glenelg, they've probably got one of the best lists in the competition outside of the 2 AFL reserve sides. And I've personally been quite disappointed by the topsy-turvy form of the Roosters. And this one was a big turnaround for them. They were in and out of the top 5. They've now got themselves just outside at the moment, but they're playing some really good footy at the moment. I saw them last week against Port Adelaide. Not so competitive. That's been the tail of the tape, bit up and down over the last few weeks. And in this particular game, they got some of their game happening again. some of their youngsters have come in and impressed. Young Jack McCann, Charlie Dinning, a few guys that are getting chances at league level. And if not for the Crows' inaccuracy, they obviously had plenty of AFL players and plenty of opportunities, but the 15 behinds didn't help them. They kicked 1-6 in that last term, and North Adelaide just kicked the 1 goal. So they were peppering. It was a tight finish in the end, but North Adelaide getting the points in a much needed win.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely, and it kind of really shows you that, I mean, good kicking is good football. I've heard it so
Yep.
much, and it keeps getting proven each and every time. So, all right,
Yep.
we'll jump to round 12, where the Maggies get a nice win over the Woodville West Torrens, 88-52. Again, I'm kind of glad Darcy's in here, because I hate when I see him kind of drop a little bit when Woodville West Torrens drops one in this one. Again, it looks like a highly competitive match just by the score worm here. So your
Yep.
thoughts on this one?
Yeah, look, I watched a bit of the highlights of this one as well, and it was a pretty even game for the first 3 quarters. And in the end, a scoreless final term from the Eagles, and Port kicking 3 goals, and probably should have kicked more, kicked 3 goals, 5 in that final term, and really just did show their class. And it often gets mentioned quite a lot, Donnie, about those AFL reserve sides being fitter. And when it comes down to the last quarter on a heavy ground in the middle of winter, when you need to find that extra 5 or 10%, the AFL players that are full-time footballers, they're training 24/7. They're not working a 9 to 5 labourer's job and then coming to training and playing on the weekend. The fitness regime really came through for Port Adelaide. So they were well served again by Francis Evans. Talked about him with his recall to the Power AFL lineup. He kicked 3 goals in this game. And one of the Eagles' best players and one of my favourite SANFL players, big Connor Ballenden, a New Zealand-born boy. He had his mum represent New Zealand in athletics at an Olympics, and his dad represented South Africa in rugby. So a great background on Connor. He was really good for the Eagles on this day, kicking 3 goals.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. We jump to it. Next one sees just, I mean, I'm looking at the score line here, and I'm sitting here. If I'm a Red Legs fan, I'm kicking myself, as they had a chance here. They fall by 30 to the Tigers, 87-57. But I look at the behinds, 15 behinds. All you got to do is take 5 of those, and this is an even game. So it's one of those. If you're the Red Legs, yes, you lose by 30, but the opportunity was there if you'd kick straight.
Yeah, and that's we talk about that. You've mentioned it just before. Bad kicking is bad football, and you've got to make the most of your chances, particularly against stronger sides. And Darren Reeves has got the Glenelg side as a well-oiled machine at the moment. Yes, they had a bit of a blip on the radar with their loss last week to the Crows, but they were just too classy on the day. Competitive from Norwood. Again, some players in and out of the side due to injury, but young Liam Robinson's a very talented forward. Kicked a couple of goals, and he's starting to make his way through. And it would have been an important game for him and his family. I know his dad, Mark, really well, and his grandfather, I think John, was a legend at the Glenelg Footy Club. So always nice to play well against a club you've got a connection to. But speaking of playing well, Donnie, the star of the SANFL for mine, Liam McBean, the big key forward, #1 for the Tigers. He kicked 6 goals, and he was just the difference on the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you've got that big forward and he's kicking accurately, sometimes they can be an absolute nightmare to stop.
Yep.
So we jump over to Flinders University as South take on the North Roosters. And this is one of those, I mean, I don't have to look at the highlights. All I have to do is look at these score lines again. Bad kicking is bad football, but somebody's got to win it, as the Roosters get a 15-point win, 45-30. But I mean, 21 behinds kicked in this game. I mean, the disappointment level in the fan base has probably had to have been fun in this one.
Yeah, and I dubbed this one the Jekyll and Hyde Cup, because both sides have been playing exactly that, very up and down. One week playing some good footy, South Adelaide on a bit of a run of some poor form, and North Adelaide having that big win against the Crows and wanting to back it up. And from memory, watching the highlights of this one, it was again tough conditions down south, Flinders University Stadium, down in the suburb of Noarlunga. Blustery, windy, heavy, boggy ground. And I think from memory, that was South's lowest score against North Adelaide. So there's some records there that they won't want to have broken, but unfortunately did. And the Roosters just getting that important win with a somewhat solid 4-quarter performance.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And then another also low scoring as we go to Hisense Stadium is as Sturt just edge out Westies 38-32 in a game. You can definitely tell these are winter games because of these low scoring games, but sometimes they can be competitive. But man, if you just look at the score line, this is horrible footy. Again, I kid, ladies and gentlemen, I kid, but it's just one of those where those that know me, that follow when I cover the women's game, is that's all I hear on social media. It's low scoring, it's bad footy.
Yeah.
There's a men's game that really kind of blows that whole thing out. It's 38-32, and these are guys that are at their peak level. But again, I kid a lot, but Sturt edging and Westies again playing tight, close games, just not able to get the Chalkies in this one.
Yeah, and as that coach Adam Hartlett said, just lacking that little bit of polish and some experience. They're a young side coming through. Sturt certainly had some more experienced players in their lineup and stood up in the clutch moments. I think again a wintry wet day, like you alluded to. Richmond Oval does get a little bit boggy, but the Double Blues with some class, and they're led beautifully by their skipper James Battersby. He's a gun midfielder in this competition, a two-time premiership player, and he had 33 touches on the day, and he was probably one of the best players on the ground, which got the Double Blues over the line.
And last but not least, I know you'd like to ignore. I know you like to ignore this one as well, Phil, as a diehard Duggies man. But the Crows with a nice 104-36 win. But again, I look at it and I kind of go, the Duggies should be kind of holding their breath a little bit because there's 14 behinds by Adelaide. This could have been even worse. So, wow.
Yeah, this was an exhibition game in the beautiful Barossa Valley, the town of Nuriootpa, about an hour out of Adelaide in the northern area, and obviously a famous wine region. If you know anything about Australia, you'll know the Barossa Valley. And yeah, it was a big win for the Crows. It was the record win against Central and the lowest score the Dogs had kicked against the Crows. And this game was played at a very, very blustery oval where the majority of the day the ball was on the outer side. So it was tough for the commentators at the back of a small kind of a country grandstand. But the Crows, again, too much class. 19 AFL listed players from memory. Jackson Haitley just dominated through the midfield. Shane McAdam earned his AFL recall with 3 goals, and not too much to like about for Central. They were exposed in the midfield and really struggled to find a forward up in attack that could kick them a winning score.
Yeah, sometimes you just run into a buzzsaw and that happened,
Yeah,
like I said.
yeah.
So we'll move to the final round that has played since the last time we have talked, and that is round 13. And at least, hey, we go from that previous performance to one that'll make you smile as the Duggies get an 11-point win over Westies again. Westies again playing those competitive games, just not unable to get over the top. So I'll let you have your fun. Brag about the Duggies getting a win finally.
Well, it was a bit of a heartstopper for those that were at the ground. I was at another ground commentating Port Adelaide and North Adelaide rather, but this game was an hour ahead. So getting some scores down the line. And Donnie, there was 5 lead changes in the final term. Westies hit the front at the 19-minute mark. The Dogs got a goal, and it was seesawing in that last term, if not for Nick Lange and Ethan East kicking some important goals in the dying stages for the Dogs. They bounced back importantly with a win. And somewhat surprisingly, that was Central's first win away from home. So their first win on the road, which if you're going to be competitive and play finals, and Centrals are sitting in 6th, just outside the race for the 5, they had to win these important tight games. And by all reports, they had some players find some form again. And Ethan East, who was out suspended, the second time he's been suspended this year, he really made up for his ill discipline, kicking 4 goals, including one of the match winners from outside 50 metres.
Fantastic. And it's good to see it. Keeping that finals connection together because I know when I talk with my waffle commentator, he says that unfortunately their finals may be already set and there's still 6 or 7 rounds left in the season. So you like keeping it to where there's a few there's a few storylines going into those last few rounds of who can make finals, who may miss out. So it leaves some intrigue a little bit. So it's great to see the Doggies staying within touch of the finals. We jump to it, as you kind of said, Glenelg has a hiccup as the Adelaide Crows reserves beat them by 20, 101-81. Again, some fantastic footy. Again, a lot of behinds kicked in this one. I think if you're a Glenelg fan, this is one that got away from you. It didn't hurt you in the long run because of the fact that you have that win over Sturt. So you're still even at the top of the ladder, but that one had to hurt a little bit because this one got away from them.
Yeah, and it broke an 11-game winning streak for memory, Donnie. So the Tigers lost their first game of the year and then won their next 11. And they did come up against a classy Adelaide side who, again, bolstered by a quality number of AFL players. And big Elliot Himmelberg's played some AFL footy this year, 5 or 6 games from memory, and he was important with 4 goals. And it's interesting. One of the things that is the strength of Glenelg is their forward line, their ability to kick a winning score. They kicked 11 goals, and that trio of players I mentioned, Lockie Hosey, Liam McBean, Luke Reynolds, kicked 11. So certainly they've got the capabilities in attack. Maybe one downfall for Glenelg is their midfielders perhaps don't kick enough goals. And you see that with AFL listed sides where you get your midfielders kicking goals, and they were contributed by the Adelaide side. And yeah, the Crows at the end of the day were just too strong. No doubt Darren Reeves will be disappointed in the loss, but there's no issue with having a loss at this time of the year. I'm sure he'd rather it now than right on the verge of finals.
Definitely, for sure. And the best part is that it kind of keeps you from papering over the cracks. Sometimes with those
Yep.
long winning streaks, sometimes you play in a close game and you paper over a crack that maybe you probably shouldn't, but because you're winning, you're okay with it.
Yeah.
So maybe a
Yep.
loss sometimes humbles you a little bit. It kind of gets you back into the okay, we need to work on this. So it could be a good thing for the Tigers. Again, it stinks to lose a game, but sometimes you just have to accept that this could be a good thing. So all right, we
Agreed.
jump to it as the Magpies get a nice win over the Roosters, 91-53, in what looks like a cracking game. Port Adelaide roars out early, and just the Roosters really just can't pull them back in to have any shot to get by the Magpies at all.
Yeah, and inaccuracy. I think we've touched on it now 3 or 4 times over the last few rounds over a couple of different teams. 6 goals, 17. I think from memory, I called this game with Tim Saw, and I reckon out of those 17 behind, 6 of them were rushed behind. So that's still 11 shots on goal that North Adelaide players wasted opportunities. They're kicking in front of goal, let them down again. Not for the first time this year. They had equal as many scoring shots, but Port Adelaide just too classy. And speaking of classy, Orazio Fantasia, I love saying the name. It just rolls off the tongue beautifully as a commentator. He was back to some good form. I know there's been some conjecture about whether he goes back to Essendon. His body's let him down over the last few years at Port Adelaide, but his body was okay on the weekend. He kicked 3 goals. He was really good. But I like Hugh Jackson, a very impressive youngster who I think might get his AFL debut later on in the season. And somewhat fittingly, he played really well against North Adelaide because that was his junior club. But yeah, an important win for Port, who now have the most winning form in the comp. They've won their last 3. Prior to that, obviously, Glenelg losing to the Crows, and Port, they're just making a little bit of quiet noise about themselves, sitting inside the 5. And if their AFL side continues to go from strength to strength, I think the Magpies can certainly have an impact in the SANFL finals.
It'd be really interesting because I know that the Power have had several injuries up top for
Mm,
them. So for them to still be strong with a few depth players for the Sandful having to come in because some of
yep.
the upper ones have to go up and play with the AFL side. That's still impressive to continue to bank wins, even with the injury issues that the top side is seeing. So, unfortunately, the Darsville Cup here unfortunately does not go your way, and I kill to hear what Dars has to say about this one. As Woodville Ones Torrens get the 11-point win over Norwood 63-52. I love seeing him smile when his team gets a win. So I'm interested to see what your thoughts on this one. Again, another competitive game. This except for the Magpies Roosters game, every single one of these games are within 10. So it's great to see some competitive footy this late in the season.
Yeah, for sure. And Norwood understanding their situation, being at the bottom of the ladder, still needing to win to keep their very faint flicker finals hopes alive, and were competitive for 3 quarters in this one. I think it was a 1 point ball game at 3 quarter time, and a couple of goals to 3 behinds in that final term. Just saw the Eagles get up, and a really important win for the Eagles because they were slipping away from the top 5. I'm sure Das will agree that if they lost this one, then finals might have just been a bit of an issue for them. So they stay in check with an important win. And some youngsters really stepping up, some younger guys, some lesser known guys for the Eagles, really playing some good, consistent footy. I know their coach, Jade Sheedy's been very pleased with the exposure that some of his younger guys have got. And that's going to happen when you have a high turnover. They've lost a lot of players. They lost some players, obviously, mid-season AFL draft and some injuries, long-term injuries for them. So Daniel Menzel retired as well, a superstar at both Geelong and, of course, your boys, Sydney. He retired last week, I think it was. And yeah, a bit of a blow to the depth for the Eagles, but a good win for them against a struggling Norwood.
Yeah, and last but not least, last game of it, see Sturt bounce back, get a nice little win over Westies 107-73, and another cracking one. 17 goals kicked by Sturt. Maybe they're finally starting to find the center sticks a little bit more.
Yeah, their second biggest score on the year from memory. And this was an interesting game because it was played at Unley, which is a small postcard size type oval that's copped a lot of rain and it doesn't have great drainage. We see a lot of AFLW games being played there. And in the off season, they're getting a whole oval revamp. They've already spent millions on the new grandstand. And the ground's going to get dug up and relined and some drainage put in. And the coach of South Adelaide, Jared Wright, as soon as the game was finished, was very critical of what was a very heavy, boggy ground. So that contributed to a couple of players getting injured. And no sooner had he fired that off that pot shot to the Double Blues, they came back out and said, well, hang on, we still kicked 17 goals and had no players injured. So maybe Jared just making some excuses there, but certainly beaten by a better side. Sturt bounced back after some patchy form. and for mine really showed that they're going to be a finals contender. And I think I'm going to really safely say that they'll play finals and go deep, the Double Blues.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, if you look at it, even if you just look by ladder, I think Sturt and Glenelg right now look to be the
Yep.
likely grand final competing teams. But again, you just never know. Finals is a completely different animal at times. So we'll jump to it. Burning questions again. Fantastic rounds of footy again. I'm trying to catch these highlights, but I've unfortunately this week I've been inundated. I actually had 4 podcasts this week, and they've been a
Wow.
couple of really good ones. I had just talked with Waffle commentator Paul Persick, and absolutely fantastic one. It just came out really recently. So if you get a chance, I know this may be a SANFL podcast, but a absolutely fantastic chat I had with Paul, and a fun one coming out very, very soon with a recruiter, with a Mike Curran, who actually recruits for the AFLW in Ireland, an Irish
Nice.
national, and a absolutely fantastic conversation coming out here soon. So little plugs there. And we'll jump right into it. Burning questions here, Phil. I'm interested to hear what you say. Is as we talked about it, Glenelg is at the top of the ladder again by percentage, even with Sturt. But I mean, Glenelg, for I think for all intents and purposes, is the team everybody's talking about as being the best team in the comp this year. So, are they the most likely to end up minor premiers, or is Sturt still challenging them as they are even up going in with only, let's see, 5 rounds left in the season?
Well, look, based on that position, as you said, the two sides that you talked about, Glenelg and the Double Blues, are certainly going to have to be, up there with the premiership favourites. But we saw on the weekend that the Adelaide Crows can really have an impact. However, what we also see is 6 changes at AFL level for them filters back down to the SANFL. So they'll go from beating Glenelg, the top of the table Tigers, and now they're going to have some real depth tested with some SANFL top-up players coming in. So the other thing come finals time is the Adelaide Crows can only play 17 AFL listed players, so that'll impact
Mhm.
their capabilities and their quality come finals time. So, yeah, I think Glenelg will be the minor premiers. I think Sturt will challenge them in the last few weeks, and it might come down to percentage. But I have no doubt that if it's a Sturt Glenelg grand final, count on having 40,000 plus at the grand final, Donnie, because traditionalists will know that they're two sides that don't like each other, and they've got a bit of history going back to the 70s and 80s, and no doubt that'll be a massive finals campaign with those two sides. But for mine, yeah, Glenelg minor premiers, I think we'll see finish.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And again, just looking at this, it's like they're one of the best offensive teams in the entire comp,
Yep.
having the most scored for them. Offensive and defensively have given up one of the least. Only Adelaide has given up less in the competition. So not only are they good offensively, but good defensively too. So I have a hard time seeing it. Sturt will be there. I think sure will be
Mm.
there. I think they'll just fall a little bit short on that one. So this is a little bit of a different question because it really leaves it open here. Is who do you think is the dark horse team to watch out for in these last final games that's going to shape the finals? Not get in, not fall out. What team is going to shape the finals with not only who they play, but how the results may turn out?
I might go my boys, the Bulldogs, because I just feel like the next couple of weeks is going to be pretty telling for them. They play South Adelaide on the weekend, and if they want to get back inside the finals, then that's a really important game for them. And I don't see them playing finals, Donny. They've got some AFL teams to face in the latter part of the season. I think they played the Port Adelaide side in the last minor round, and that could be telling to see whether they qualify or not. But I think Centrals have been very good and very bad at various times this year, and they might be able to have a bit of a say in the makeup of the final five. And probably 2 weeks ago, I would have absolutely said Port Adelaide. But as I touched on earlier, having won 3 games on the trot, they are definitely making their own mark come the latter part of the season. They've squeezed themselves up into the top five, and they might still challenge for a top 3 spot. And we know to get a double chance and that all important top 3 finish is really critical to play finals and to win a premiership. And don't be surprised to see the Magpies really start to swoop on their opponents in the latter part of the year.
Definitely for sure. And just looking at it, I mean, from fourth to sixth, there's only a 2 game gap. So there's
Yeah.
still plenty to play for. In fact,
Yep.
it's actually a great transition. I said 5 games left in the season. It's sad to see this, that only 5 games left in the year. In the year till we hit finals, which is always the sad part of the year when it's coming closer to the end. But I mean, I look at it. Port Adelaide and South and North are right there with only 2 game gaps ahead of Centrals and Woodville West Torrens. So I asked this: what team Is there a team that can sneak in, or are the final five set and we're just looking at position?
Yeah, for mine right now, right at this very minute, I think just the final five is set. I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles make a bit of a shake of it. Having a look at their draw, they've got some easier games compared to the sides above them in Centrals and North Adelaide. So I think with Glenelg top, the Double Blues in second, might be a mix of Adelaide and the Crows, the two AFL reserves teams swapping. And I think North Adelaide might just have enough points in the bank to hold fifth spot. So maybe the Eagles might be able to shape them and sneak in. And perhaps the Doggies. Obviously, my heart says I'd love Centrals to get into the finals. I think for the first time since 2017. So a 6-year drought for the Doggies fans. But yeah, I'm going to go the Eagles, who I think might be able to just squeeze into the finals if anything changes.
Awesome, awesome. I think, well, hopefully Darce hears this. That would make him smile so big. It's absolutely awesome. So, alrighty. And unfortunately, like I said, women's season is over. So let's jump to it. Round 14 tipping here. So let's pull this up. Yeah, round 15 is not what I want. I want round 14. Live podcasting sometimes can be fun. So alrighty, we'll jump to it. Glenelg v Westies at Stratorama Stadium in Adelaide. I think this is, I don't think I'm jumping too far. Tigers win this. I think West Adelaide stays in this, but again, Tigers just too good.
Yeah, and you look at the odds, $1.06 versus $8. That really typifies how favourite Glenelg will be. But Donnie, don't be surprised if the next time we catch up, stranger things can happen. There's just a sniff of an upset maybe in the air. West Adelaide are playing some competitive footy, and Glenelg's confidence might take a bit of a hit. You would think they'd be too good on paper. They're at home. They've got a great crowd that support them well at Stratorama Stadium. So look, for mine, I think the Tigers will win maybe by 3 or 4 goals, but don't be surprised the next time we catch up, I'll be saying I told you so. There was that upset.
It's the keep an eye on, as I say in my AFL
Absolutely.
ones. There are ones that I go, I'm not going to tip it, but I'm going to say if it happens, I wouldn't be surprised on that one. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the keep an eye on calls, as I say sometimes in my AFL podcast. So another one to keep an eye on here, just because of the fact that, again, this isn't for a final spot, but again, Norwood's playing better. North v Norwood. I'm going to jump out on a limb. The Roosters inconsistent play. Norwood's playing a little bit better. Yes, they've had a couple of losses, but I don't know. There's something about this. I'm going to tip Norwood in the road upset at Prospect Oval.
Yeah, look, this is a grand final rematch. These two sides have had a nice little bit of rivalry over recent seasons, and seeing the teams released tonight, North have got a couple of quality players out injured, so their depth will be tested. The reserves are going okay, and conversely, North have got some guys back, and they're going to maybe debut another couple of youngsters. Isaac Twelftree made his debut last week, and that's probably been the one positive that Norwood have had out of a bit of a terrible year with injuries and some bad form. These young kids are getting their opportunity, and no doubt Jade Rawlings will like blooding those guys to see who's up to league standard. This one's a bit of a toss of the coin. I think I'm going to stick with North based on home ground advantage, only just. But yeah, the Roosters for mine might just get the points in a tight one.
That'd be absolutely cracking one. All right, over to X Convenience Oval as your beloved Bulldogs take on South. I'll tip the home dog. I tip the home doggies. I think this might be the win that they need to kind of get them going, maybe to get some positive momentum with some tougher games moving on through the home and away season.
Yeah, I was chatting with their coach, Paul Thomas, who I grew up with and went to school with today, and said it should be the first time this year that he'll go into a game with an unchanged lineup. So some stability for Paul there. Those players I mentioned came back from injury and suspension. And look, South Adelaide season really on the line. And if they continue to get these terrible losses, then the pressure, as I said, has to be on Jared Wright. He's been there 6 years now, and they've certainly been one of the more underperforming sides. So that being said, Donnie, they've had the wood. The Panthers have had the wood over Central, and I reckon from memory, doing my notes for this game that I'm calling, they've won something like 8 of the last 12 games and 4 of the last 5 at Elizabeth. So the Panthers will go in with a little bit of confidence just from that record, but their form line might just, for mine, see the Doggies get the win, I reckon.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one though. That'll be a cracking game to keep an eye on just because of that history. So, and I think it's going to be absolutely could be game of the round at Alberton Oval as Port Adelaide Magpies take on Sturt. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, cracking game of the round. Although that being said, those 6 AFL changes at the top level for Port Adelaide mean that some quality come out of the Magpies. That also being said, then there's some quality coming back, and none more than Tom Jonas unable to hold his spot, the captain of Port Adelaide's AFL side. he'll be back playing SANFL. And nice little touch. His brother Sam played some SANFL footy for the Double Blues a few years ago, so he'll no doubt want to get the win against his brother's old club. And looking at the teams on paper, I'm actually going to go Sturt. Even though it's at Alberton, Port played the home ground pretty well. I think the Double Blues are too good a side to drop this one, and they'll understand the importance in terms of cementing a top 3 spot. And I reckon Marty Matner's Double Blues will get the win.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll go Sturt. I think Sturt's got a little bit more, but again, it's one of those Alberton Oval home ground advantage. It'll be fascinating one to keep an eye on. I'll tip Sturt, but this is a keep an eye on. Port at home. Never know. And then last but not least, Woodville West Torrens v Adelaide. Here's your shot. If the Eagles want to make finals, can they throw a fox into the hen house and find a way to nip the Crows? I think the Crows are going to be just a little bit too good, but I mean, Eagles, this is their opportunity. They want to make finals. You got to get a win here.
Yeah, without a doubt. In the Battle of the Birds, the Avian Cup, the Eagles versus the Crows. And I think the Eagles get Adelaide at a pretty good time, because Adelaide, a bit like what we talked about with Port Adelaide, depth will be tested from an AFL selection perspective, because I know Rory Laird's not playing. They've dropped a couple of AFL boys, and there'll be some out injured getting rested as well. Rochelle obviously suspended. So that's going to test the depth, the SANFL depth of the Adelaide Crows. And this is at home for the Eagles. They play Montine Keir well. It's a carnival day. A good friend of mine, Phil Herden, who's been running carnival day at the Eagles for a long, long time. Free entry for kids. There'll be games, mini league games on from 8:30 in the morning. It's a real family day atmosphere. And I think the family for the Eagles supporters will be pretty happy on the day, because I reckon they'll get the points.
Yeah, it'll be an absolute cracking game. Again, those last two probably may be the best games of the entire round for sure. So
Yep.
that'll be fun. So, all right, Phil. Again, a little bit shorter because we don't have the women's to cover, but again, it's a great footy action. Again, 5 weeks left in the SANFL season. So I think the next time we will convene, we will review all of the last 5 games and cover the finals and what you guys think could be the potential team to hold up the premiership. So, Phil, another fantastic conversation. I'm glad everything's going well. I know you've had a few things happen personally. So, again, I want to send my thoughts with you. I'm glad that everything looks okay. Smile on your face, and the calls are still fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Donnie. Appreciate it, mate. It has been a tough couple of weeks. My little boy's been ill, and my mother-in-law passed away. So, yeah, no, it's been a tough couple of weeks. But footy's been the constant. Being in the commentary box is my happy place, and I love it. Yeah, look, it's a great SANFL competition. It's evening up, as we said, in that race for the top 5. Unlike Paul with the Waffle Boys, where we think the final's already set, it's going to be a great race to see who makes the final 5.
I know Paul threw in our conversation. He thinks maybe 6th place has still got a shot, but
Yep.
it will not be easy for them, especially considering that top 5 is very, very competitive. And unfortunately, with South having their points deficit to start the season after a few issues there, that South is really kind of they were in a hole to begin with it. And unfortunately, I think Subi and Swans are just going to fall short of that. So, but
Yep.
it's been fun to keep an eye on both of these competitions, because I think there's a lot of competitiveness in that 2 to 4, 2 to 5, and 6 range. So it'd be fascinating to see. I'm really going to keep an eye on this, because like I said, I'll keep my fingers crossed that maybe the Eagles or the Duggies make finals, so we have a team to kind of cheer on when it
Yep.
comes to 2 of my panelists. So that,
Agreed.
ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it for our podcast today. Another fantastic review of the SANFL. Keep an eye out, more things to come. AFL and AFLW preview still to come. Now that we have a fixture, we need to talk how the season is going to go. So keep an eye out on that. And that'll do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposal. We'll see you again very, very soon.